He got up. He took the Penguins' first shift of the third period. He finished the game. Nobody panicked. Nobody thought much of it. Sidney Crosby had been hit 1,000 times in his career. He always got up. 4 days later, he played again. 4 days after that, he woke up and could not feel right. And just like that, the most dominant 2-month stretch any hockey player had produced in the 21st century was over. 66 points, 41 games. A 25-game point streak that belonged alongside the legends of the sport, gone. In 2 hits that, in any other context, nobody would have remembered by morning. There are multiple versions of Sidney Crosby you could make a case for as his greatest. The 19-year-old who won the scoring title. The 21-year-old who became the youngest captain in history to hoist the cup. The veteran who won back-to-back Conn Smythe trophies. In 2016 and 2017, but the most statistically dominant version of Crosby, the one that still makes people stop and wonder, what might have been might not be any of those. It might be the one that lasted 41 games, the one we only got for half a season, and never fully got back, the foundation. To understand just how special the 2010-11 season was, you need to understand what Crosby had already built. He entered the NHL in 2005 as one of the most hyped prospects the sport had ever produced. Within 2 seasons, he was arguably the best player in hockey. As a rookie, he posted 102 points, the youngest player in NHL history to reach 100 in a single season. His second year, 120 points, the youngest scoring champion ever. Art Ross, Hart Trophy, Ted Lindsay Award, all in the same year. At 21, he became the youngest captain in NHL history to lift the Stanley Cup, defeating the Detroit Red Wings in 7 games in 2009. And then, in 2009-10, something shifted. Crosby had always been terrifying as a playmaker. His vision, his passing, his ability to find teammates in impossible situations, that had always been the foundation. But in 2009-10, he added something else entirely. 51 goals. Nearly 20 more than any previous season. His first Rocket Richard Trophy. So heading into 2010-11, Crosby wasn't some young star still trying to prove something. He had already been MVP. He had already led the league in scoring. He had already won the Stanley Cup. He had already scored the golden goal at the Vancouver Olympics, and now at just 23 years old, he was coming off his first 50-goal season. There really shouldn't have been another level, but somehow, impossibly there was. November 5th. The streak begins. The 2010-11 season didn't immediately announce itself as historic. Pittsburgh stumbled through October 6 wins, and 1 loss was solid, but Crosby's numbers were standard Crosby, great, not transcendent. And then came November 5th in Anaheim. The Penguins were down 3-0. Crosby scored twice. They still lost 3-2. 2 goals and a loss. Nothing extraordinary, except those 2 goals quietly started something that wouldn't stop for nearly 2 months. The next night against Phoenix, a goal and an assist. Then a goal and 2 points against Boston. Then a goal against Tampa. Then a goal and 2 assists against Atlanta. By November 24th, Crosby had recorded points in 10 consecutive games. In those 10 games, 9 goals, 12 assists, 21 points, 10 straight. For most players, that would be the highlight of an entire season. Crosby was just getting started. On November 29th against the Calgary Flames, Crosby completed his first hat trick of the year, 3 goals, his 12th game of the streak, 25 points over the run so far. Pittsburgh won 6 in a row. The team that had spent October hovering around 500 was becoming the hottest squad in hockey. And Crosby was the reason for every bit of it. He was named the NHL's first star of November. December. The streak goes legendary. And then December arrived. And Crosby decided November wasn't enough. December 2nd, Atlanta Thrashers. Pittsburgh. Crosby scored in the first period, then twice more in the second. 2 hat tricks in 5 days. The streak was now at 14 games. Crosby had scored 15 goals during it. The Penguins kept winning. Columbus, New Jersey, Toronto, Buffalo. By December 11th, Pittsburgh had won 12 straight games, climbing from a team fighting for consistency in October to the hottest team in all of hockey. And Crosby had a point in every single one of those wins. More often than not, 2. Even when Pittsburgh's 12-game winning streak finally ended against Philadelphia, Crosby put up 2 assists in the loss. The personal streak continued. By December 15th, Crosby had 54 points in 33 games. In second place was Steven Stamkos, having an outstanding season of his own with 44 points. Crosby had opened a 10-point lead on the next best player in hockey, a 10-point gap with nearly 50 games still to play. The streak continued through Game 21, Game 22, 23, 24 straight games with a point. Only 15 other streaks in league history had ever reached that mark. Crosby was doing this in an era where streaks like this simply did not happen anymore. It was the longest point streak of the 21st century, and he needed just one more to reach 25. December 28th, Game 25. December 28th, 2010. Atlanta Thrashers, Pittsburgh. Crosby didn't ease his way into history. He scored in the first period, then scored again, then added 2 assists in the third. A 4-point night, a 6-3 Penguins win, the streak, 25 games, and now you could finally step back and look at the whole thing. Over those 25 games, Sidney Crosby had scored 26 goals and added 24 assists for 50 points. For nearly 2 straight months, Crosby had averaged exactly 2 points per game, 2 hat tricks, 16 multi-point outings in 25 games. Named the NHL's first star of the month in both November and December. The 25-game streak was tied for the 11th longest point streak in NHL history. The names ahead of him on that list? Wayne Gretzky, Mario Lemieux, Guy Lafleur. These were not just players, these were the gods of the sport. And Sidney Crosby, 23 years old, in the middle of the regular season, in an era where nobody scores at this pace, had joined their company. By the end of December, Crosby had 65 points in 33 games. Steven Stamkos was second with 52. The 13-point gap between Crosby and Stamkos was identical to the gap between Stamkos and the 11th place player Pavel Datsyuk. He wasn't just ahead, he was in a different stratosphere. The pace, what it all meant. When you zoom out from the streak itself and look at the full picture through 41 games, the numbers are almost impossible to process. 66 points in 41 games. Projected over a full 82-game season. 65 goals, 132 points. His career high in points was 120 set 4 years earlier as a 19-year-old when he won his first Hart Trophy. Now at 23, he was on pace to clear that while scoring nearly 30 more goals, and as the article that anchors this video put it, the numbers were only part of what made it special. He wasn't just producing, he was dominating every aspect of the game simultaneously. Winning board battles against bigger defenders, protecting the puck in traffic, winning face-offs, playing with physical edge, and still being the most dangerous offensive player on the ice every single shift. There was no one thing teams could take away, because he was doing everything. By January 1st, Pittsburgh had 25 wins and 53 points, tied for first in the entire NHL with the Detroit Red Wings, and the season was only halfway done. The Hart Trophy was his to lose. The Art Ross looked like a foregone conclusion. 60 goals felt realistic. 130 points felt realistic. The only question left was how far it could go. New Year's Day, the hit. January 1st, 2011. Heinz Field, Pittsburgh, the Winter Classic. 68,000 fans in the open January air. Pittsburgh Penguins versus Washington Capitals. Sidney Crosby versus Alexander Ovechkin. The biggest game of the NHL season. The 2 best players in hockey. On the biggest stage, late in the second period, the puck slid past Crosby as he looked behind him and turned to pursue it. David Steckel, a fourth-line center, skated directly through him and made contact with his head. Crosby fell to the ice, then got up gingerly and walked slowly toward the bench. "He got my head for sure," Crosby said after the game, "but I can't comment on it." He took the Penguins' first shift of the third period. He finished the game. The league announced the next day that Steckel would not be punished for the hit. And on January 5th, 4 days later, Crosby returned to the lineup against Tampa Bay. He had an assist in an 8-1 Pittsburgh win. He looked completely normal. And then Victor Hedman drove him into the boards from behind, sending his head into the glass. Crosby finished that game and flew to Montreal with the team that night. When his condition did not improve, he returned to Pittsburgh the following day for further tests. The Penguins announced he would miss 1 week. He was leading the NHL with 32 goals and 66 points in 41 games at the time of the injury. 1 week became 2. 2 became 4. 4 became the rest of the season, the aftermath. The full scope of what those 2 hits had done took months to understand. Crosby missed the final 41 games of the 2010-11 regular season. He also missed Pittsburgh's playoff run, in which the Penguins, without both Crosby and Evgeny Malkin, built a 3-1 series lead over Tampa Bay in the first round, before losing 3 straight in one of the most stunning collapses in recent postseason memory. And then the 2011-12 season started, and he still wasn't back. Crosby missed the first 20 games of the following season, pushing his total absence to more than 320 days from the NHL. 320 days. 10.5 months. The best player in hockey at the peak of his powers, in the middle of the most dominant season of his career, gone. On November 21st, 2011, after 320 days away, Crosby finally returned against the New York Islanders. He scored within 6 minutes of stepping back on the ice. He added a second goal later in the game, 2 assists, and finished with 4 points in a 5-0 Pittsburgh shutout. He came back and immediately looked like the same Sidney Crosby, but we'll never know what the full 2010-11 season would have produced. The scoring title didn't happen. The Hart Trophy he was almost certain to win didn't happen. 60 goals didn't happen. 132 points didn't happen. What happened instead is that we got 41 games. 25 of them in the most dominant point streak of the 21st century, and then it was over. Over the course of his career, we got to see almost every version of Sidney Crosby. The teenage phenom, the youngest Cup captain in history, the 2010 Olympic golden goal, the back-to-back Conn Smythe winner, the superstar who remained one of the best players in hockey deep into his late 30s. None of it is small. None of it diminishes anything. But the question that still hangs in the air, the one that comes back every time someone tries to rank the greatest seasons in NHL history, is what the 2010-11 season might have looked like if those 2 hits never happened. On pace for 65 goals and 132 points, 12 more than his previous career high. With 23 years old and 42 games left to play, 65 goals in a single season would have been the most by any player since the salary cap era began. 132 points would have been the most since Mario Lemieux in 95-96. Whether he would have maintained that pace, whether the numbers would have held, nobody will ever know for certain. But what we do know is this. For 41 games in the fall and early winter of 2010, Sidney Crosby didn't just look like the best player in hockey. He looked like the best player who had ever played it. The gap between him and Steven Stamkos, who was himself having a brilliant season, was the same gap between Stamkos and the 11th best player in the league. He wasn't pulling away from the pack. He was in a different sport entirely. And then a 4th-line center no one remembers skated through his head on New Year's Day in front of 68,000 people, and we never saw that version of him again. For 41 games, Sidney Crosby was a god among men. We'll spend the rest of our lives wondering what the rest of the season might have looked like.